want to wander around with Lorena without lights to look at the work and see if you have any other questions for her or anything else you need. Maybe the lights will magically come on. We can also hope for that, but at least we do have some sunlight. There's a lot of windows up here. The rest of the building is pitch black.
And I can't see I can't see.
You don't need them. You're fine. I'll do this. I'm done. Ladies and gentlemen, Lorena.
Well, thank you for coming and spending your afternoon with me and my artwork. I'm thrilled to have you. And I'm going to just talk for a little bit about this show and how it became a show, the roots of it, and also a little bit about what I hope it might do for you. And I'm going to start with a little story. I went to Pratt Institute, and there I met a boy named Pete Fiore. And some of you artists might actually know him. He grew up to be a very well-established landscape artist. And we reconnected on Instagram about a year ago. And his paintings, he uses extremely vibrant colors. So he was just finishing up a series of tree paintings that were like brambles and tree limbs, and it was evening and the sun is coming through these branches, and it was just really vibrant, really good, but as you can tell from my work, completely different from my sensibility. So I happened to be walking down the bike path by our house, which I have walked down every day. And I looked over to my right into the swampy woods that the bike path is right next to. And there I saw a Pete Fiore painting. It was beautiful. The oranges poking through these purple-blue branches and brambles. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I have walked down that bike path probably 1,000 times. And I have looked into that woods for years. But it was Pete Fiore that gave me the gift of seeing it newly. And that's what art can do. And that's what I hope somebody gets from this show, that something will spark them, maybe along the bay, and they'll see it with fresh eyes. Art can change people. And I think an artist's job, a visual artist's job, in part, is to help people see with new eyes. And when you do, you feel deeply about what you're seeing. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the genesis of this show, because it actually really began in France a couple years ago. I was lucky enough to spend 7 weeks in a little medieval hilltop village, complete with castle, and there I started to do some landscape gouache paintings. And gouache is an opaque watercolor. I have a number of gouache paintings in the show. So every morning I would get up in the dark, grab my art supplies, walk down to the side of the hill, set up my easel, and wait for dawn. Before the sun rose over the mountains or the hills, the animals would start their morning chorus. There were farms on the other side of the valley, and there were wild animals, and it was so soothing and lovely. And then the sun would come up, enough for me to see, and I'd start to paint. And it was a race, because the colors were becoming more and more vibrant every second, and the shadows were shortening. And I needed all my attention, kind of like meditating, where you need to be in the moment. And I loved it. You see, before I went to France, I didn't do plein air painting. I was a contemporary still life realist, which means I painted, what I painted was big pears that were very feminine, and they were wrapped in translucent tissue. And before that, I painted dogs, and I had a print business. So I was brand new to landscape art. So when I came home to Rhode Island, I wanted to paint Narragansett Bay. It's right at the end of my street. I walk its beaches every morning. I swim in the water, and I wanted Narragansett Bay to be my muse. So I'm an open water swimmer, and another thing that I wanted to paint were big waves. I wanted to paint waves from the perspective of a swimmer, kind that you want to dive into. And also as a swimmer, I'm very grateful that over the years I've lived here, Narragansett Bay has become cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. When we first moved to Rhode Island, you didn't want to swim in Narragansett Bay. And now the swim community, as some of you know, is huge. So I feel very grateful to save the bay. And I had this idea, maybe a show of little landscapes of the bay and big waves could be something that could benefit Save the Bay. So I talked with some people there, and they loved the idea. But, you know, it was just an idea. I didn't have a single painting done, and we didn't have a space big enough for life-size waves. And it wasn't even 2 weeks later that at my open studio, I met Donna Parsons. And she came into my studio and she said, "Lori, would you be interested in having a solo show at Dryden Gallery?" Well, I'm embarrassed to say I had never been here before. So I came and took a look at it about a week later. This is an enormous space. There are 350 linear feet of wall space for hanging art. I was intimidated and excited. So when Donna asked me again, "Lori, would you be interested in having a solo show here?" I said yes, but not next week. So we decided that two years was enough. Donna decided. She said, "Lori, you can do this. You can do this." If I had a dime for every time you said, "Lori, you can do this," throughout these past 2 years, I would be a wealthy woman. So I began work on this project in January of 2017. And really it was kind of two separate journeys. One was just physically discovering places to paint around the bay, figuring out how I was going to represent Narragansett Bay in this show. Narragansett Bay is 147 square miles, and 2 years is not a whole lot of time to cover that. The other journey I've been on is really becoming a landscape painter. I had a lot to learn. And that first winter, I learned a lot. For instance, I learned that you should not stand in snow for 2 hours. It's not good for your feet. So I went and bought some super duper Arctic boots, good for 40 below. Big boots. My next lesson was you should not drive your Mini Cooper that's a clutch wearing super duper Arctic boots. Mike Garr here gave me a pop-up tent to keep the rain and the snow out. And I learned that nothing really keeps the rain and the snow out. And because of that lesson, I learned that if you add enough of a particular medium to your oil paints, they will stick to canvas that's frozen and wet. And when it's blowing and below zero, I should have learned that you don't go out when it's blowing and below zero. But what I did learn was you can put down the base colors, the base composition in under 20 minutes, and then run back to your studio in your Arctic boots and finish the painting by the wood-burning stove. I really enjoy painting in the winter. The snow is beautiful. You know, winter has low light, big shadows, and on snow, the blues and the purples. I've always been a sucker for winter landscape painting, and it's kind of fun to paint my own. As a matter of fact, I think the most fun that I've had is in my little pop-up tent with big flakes of snow falling all around, the wind is blowing, and I'm painting fast and furious trying to get it down before my bottom freezes off. Now, most people paint in the summertime, which makes sense, right? I find that the summer has some hazards as well. There are a lot of people around Narragansett Bay in the summertime. And if you're standing there with your easel and your paints, working, concentrating, you are an attraction.
Yeah.
And there have been plenty of times when I was deep in concentration working on something that a kind, well-meaning person has interrupted me to ask me if they could interrupt me to ask me a question. And there are mosquitoes and heat. But for every difficult outing, there are 5 that are just a slice of heaven. Imagine walking up to a quiet inlet and the birds fly off. The blue herons, the egrets, the ducks, you know, if it's fall and winter, the ducks. And you set up and you start quietly working, and within a short period of time, the blue herons come back, the egrets come back, they're fishing right there. You hear a little plop in the water. You have no idea what made it, but you hear rustles in the reeds. It's just lovely. The morning light shining that golden color on everything. I think what I like the most about plein air painting is the intentional looking that it requires. I think in the 2 years that I've worked on this project, I think I see better. I think I see deeper somehow. And things seem more beautiful to me. I think when we take the time to really look at our world, we appreciate it so much more. And when we appreciate it so much more, we protect it. So my secret hope for this show is that someone will have a gift of seeing newly. And my other secret hope is that you enjoyed this talk, because it's over. Yes?
Are these waves winter or summer? They look more winter.
Well, they're imagination, really. I mean, I invented most of it, but they're from a court. There was a day at Narragansett Beach that was really stormy, and I think it was October. I know it looks cold because of the blue. I think it was like October, and there was this big storm, and I took some reference. So that was sort of the seed for what this became.
Well, it makes it looking like what we're seeing now, right? That's so perfect representation.
Thanks. Thanks. So I'll answer any questions you have. And, you know, just before you do it, I want to acknowledge my brother Michael here. He's come from California, and he came by way of Maryland to pick up my mother to be here for the talk.
Very good.
So, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to acknowledge Donna here, who helped me every step of the way through this project.
You can do it.
Okay, thank you, Donna. And of course, my husband, who's the wind beneath my wings. I wouldn't be able to paint if it wasn't for him. Anyway, does anyone have any questions? I brought some materials we can talk about, if you're interested in materials or anything else. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. Most of your stuff is on canvas, but I also noticed you have some on aluminum.
Yep.
What does that change the color underneath? Or does it change it? Like,
I
why
don't think it changes the color. I use aluminum, and I actually I meant to unpack this, and I didn't. I brought a piece of aluminum if anyone was curious about it. Artists are beginning to work on aluminum a lot lately, and that's because doesn't expand and contract like everything else does. Like wood expands and contracts quite a bit, and obviously if your work is on canvas, it's going to flex. So for archival reasons, aluminum is what we believe right now to be the best surface to paint on. So that's one reason. Another is you get to cut it to what size you want. It's kind of a little bit easier than stretching canvas and relying on everything to be whatever size your stretchers are. So I like working on it.
Is the verso side the same, both sides the same?
Yeah, it is. It is, and they come in different thicknesses. And you have to do a bit of preparing because you can't just paint on this. Paint will
Rough
fall
it
off.
up.
Yeah, you have to